Welcome back to the Linux Academy NGINX Deep Dive. In this last video, before we start working with NGINX and getting it installed and starting to configure things, we're going to cover the differences between NGINX and NGINX Plus. And we're going to come up against these a few times throughout this course for sure, but a lot of people sort of wonder what the difference is. So thankfully, they actually themselves have provided a feature matrix for us so we can see what's missing from the open source version of NGINX versus NGINX Plus. And when it comes to a lot of the standard features, which is going to be using it as a reverse proxy, everything related to HTTP here, you're going to find that that's all very much included in the open source version. This is why the open source version of NGINX is so awesome. It has a lot of really awesome features right out of the box. As we continue to move on into different things, you'll see that load balancing, when it comes to that, NGINX Plus adds additional features that we don't have access to when it comes to the open source version. But load balancing at its core is really about just routing traffic to different versions of the same application and then making some modifications to those. So as we go through load balancing later in the course, you might find that we run into a situation where it just doesn't meet your needs. And that might be something where you would consider going with an NGINX Plus license because of some of the extra things that you'll get out of it. But even with this single check mark that we get here, you'll find that this is pretty beneficial to us, and it is a really powerful feature of the server. There's quite a bit of security stuff going on here that you can see, but some of the extra things include JWT authentication, so it'll generate some JavaScript tokens for you if you want. But you'll see that Mod Security 3.0 web application firewall is in here at an additional cost. But you'll notice that in this course, we actually install this firewall and get it configured. So this is one of the things to sort of realize about NGINX Plus, is it's there both because they have some proprietary features that they don't ship out in the open source version, but additionally, they just take away some of the headache involved if you want to extend NGINX using what's already out there in the open, because sometimes it is kind of tedious. And when we go through and we work with Mod Security and we get that installed, we'll find that it actually takes quite a while to compile. And if you don't compile it exactly correctly, you'll run into issues also. So that is one thing to consider, is that NGINX Plus can take away some of the potential headaches that you might run into if you're going to be extending NGINX on your own. But that doesn't mean that you can't get the features of NGINX Plus in the open source version just by going out and adding a little bit more in terms of some extra modules. High availability and clustering is one thing that is completely left out from the open source version of NGINX. There are many alternative ways that you would go about doing some high availability things when it comes to using NGINX, and it's probably going to involve you using NGINX as a piece of a larger architecture. But another area where you're going to find that it's kind of lacking is going to be in media delivery. So if you're doing a lot of live streaming and you need to broadcast that yourself, that is something that you're not going to find in the open source version of NGINX. And then there are some additional administrative things that you're going to find, specifically live activity monitoring. We're going to see some passive monitoring and passive health checks using load balancers later on, but there's an actual live activity monitoring dashboard that you can utilize. And the kind of more important feature here is on-the-fly reconfiguration of the load balancer. So there's an API that you can utilize to reconfigure the load balancer without needing to reload any configuration, which that is a very powerful feature. That is probably the one feature that I'm really jealous isn't in the open source version. As we went through this list, and I encourage you to go through this list on your own, you'll see that most of the core features that you're going to want are going to be part of the open source version of NGINX, and you will have a very specific use case if you need to utilize NGINX, and you'll know if that's you, but this isn't something we're going to run into throughout this course. We're not going to utilize NGINX Plus, and there are only a few occasions where we're going to run into something in the documentation that hints at a feature of NGINX Plus that we wish we really had.